Hello and welcome to the Owl's Nest, and welcome to week 4 of the Overwatch League, where the homestands are going to be held in Houston. And after what was a really exciting weekend of Overwatch last weekend in Washington, I'm excited to see what this weekend has in store. There should be a lot of close matchups that I'm really excited to watch, and I hope you guys are too. Now, real quickly, we're going to go through last week's matchups, and then I'm going to share how you guys thought they would go down compared to the final results, and then we're going to go through this weekend's matchups and my overall thoughts, and I'll invite you guys to vote so we can repeat the same process next weekend. So starting with the first Saturday match in Washington, we had the Philadelphia Fusion versus New York, and honestly, Philly just looked really dominant here. These are two very top tier teams, but Philadelphia looked like they were playing a tier above New York. I thought they just outclassed them on almost every role, especially on the May. I thought Ivy looked really comfortable, whereas Who Are You was a little bit shaky, which was new for him because he looked really good in his first couple games. And I don't really think this is New York is bad. I think it's more just Philly is really comfortable in this meta, and honestly a pretty dangerous team to the rest of the league. My prediction for this matchup was New York taking it 3-2, and as for you guys had New York taking it 60% of the vote. And obviously we were both wrong, as Philadelphia took it 3-1. So a bit of an upset, but not too shocking because we knew these were the two best teams kind of going in. Next up, we have the opposite of Philly versus New York with Houston versus Boston. And a lot of other Overwatch League content creators have kind of beat this to death. I recommend Dividing by Zero or ATP Overwatch's video on the matchup, but it was kind of a nightmare to watch, having it go to 7 maps with 2 draws in between, and Boston finally taking it 3-2. It was pretty tough to watch because it's not necessarily great Overwatch. It felt like a big plat game, and I think that Boston did have some light. Obviously they won the game, but I thought Jerry, Muffin, and Swimmer, their rookies who were playing, looked pretty good, and Axiom looks pretty good on the main tank role as well. And as for Houston, I think they still have the issues that we've been bringing up for the past couple of weeks, which is really unfortunate to see, especially as they're hosting a homestand this weekend. But I'm not too shocked by the results of Boston winning it 3-2, which is what I predicted. And as for the fans, you guys were pretty split on this one. You had 53% of the vote going to Houston, but not really an upset, more just an even split amongst the vote. Next up is going to be the first matchup for the hometown team last weekend, and that was Paris versus Washington, and I thought Paris's rookies really showed up here. I thought Exy looked strong once again, and Hanbin looked really good on his debut for off-tank on the Paris Eternal. When he rolled out on Sigma on the first map, that was quite a surprise, but it worked effectively, and I think he is just kind of what this tank line needed, now that they are transitioning to a more Korean roster. Also, when Tuba came in for Washington, I thought he looked good on the off-meta roles, which it looks like is what they're going to use him for. For anything Stratus doesn't really feel comfortable playing, I think Tuba will come in to play that. And I think Washington is almost a good team. They're just not quite there yet. I think they're better than their 1-3 record suggests they are, but they still have a few things to work out. Whereas Paris, I think they're really surprising this season. Now they're 2-1, and I think a lot of people thought they'd be doing a lot worse than they are right now. Anyway, my prediction for this matchup was Washington taking it 3-1, and the fans had Washington taking it 60% over 40% for Paris, and obviously Paris took it 3-1, so a little bit of an upset there as well. Now let's go ahead and transition into the Sunday matchups, where we had the New York Excelsior taking on the Houston Outlaws, and these are probably two polar opposite teams. New York is the best of the best, whereas Houston is not. And it was nice to see New York bounce back after losing to Philly the day before. Once again, that was a pretty close matchup, so it could have gone either way, but still, there was a little bit of a worry that I had that New York might play down to their competition, and that did not happen here. It was pretty much a massacre. It was a quick 3-0 for New York, one of the fastest matches of the weekend, and it was nice to see New York play well. And Houston, once again, same issues. I'm curious about their hit scan position, and it looks like they are making a change this weekend. And Muma really hasn't been showing up, and I think their flex support is also an issue too, so they have some things to work out. But Anyway, I had this being a 3-0 to New York. It was a 3-0 to New York, and 100% of you guys all had New York beating Houston, so no one was too shocked by this one. Next up is the Philadelphia Fusion versus the Toronto Defiant, and I was very surprised by the effort that Toronto put in after being down 2-0 at half. The fact that this was nearly a reverse sweep is kind of a testament to the mentality of Toronto, and we weren't sure how this team was going to do, but the fact that they didn't really crumble under that pressure and almost pulled off the reverse sweep is pretty impressive. Though I think this is, once again, just a testament to how good Philly is right now. And I think that Toronto really made a name for themselves. Considering my prediction was 3-1 Philly and it ended up being 3-2 Philly, and going to that map 5, I think this can be chalked up as almost a win for the Defiant. And as for the fan vote, you guys had 60% going to the Fusion, which is lower than I thought it would be. I thought more of you guys would lean Philadelphia right now, but still, you guys were right on the 60%, as was I for the Philly prediction. I got the map count wrong, but yeah, overall, I thought this was another good one. And finally, one of my favorite series we've seen this season so far was the London Spitfire versus Washington, which ended the Washington homestand. And one of the big names that stood out to me was Sanguinar on Lucio for the Spitfire. He looked really good. He was one of the more unknown names going on this roster going into this season, and I thought he performed really well for the team. And also watching Glister versus Corey was really fun too, because those are two of the main hit scan specialists for their respective teams and kind of the star player amongst kind of a murky lineup for both teams. However, after Washington got their first 2 maps off, I thought the Dorado hold by London was nuts. The fact that they successfully held outside the door for 4 minutes and that Washington could only move the cart 4 meters was incredible to watch, and this was just a great series. If you guys missed this one, it might have been late in your time zone. I recommend watching the VOD. It was fantastic. Sorry I spoiled it though. Anyway, my prediction for this matchup was Washington taking it 3-1, and it ended up being a reverse sweep, obviously, with London taking it 3-2. And as for the fan vote, you guys had Washington winning 80%, so London winning didn't really seem like a possibility, but there we go. So that's going to do it for covering the Week 3 matchups. Let's go ahead and jump into Week 4. Alright, and now let's go ahead and jump into Week 4's matchups, and we're going to start with the New York Excelsior versus the Florida Mayhem. And New York's goal for this match should really try to be just shaking off the loss to Philly the best they can. Florida is a much weaker team than Philly. Philly beat them at their homestand pretty handily, and I think that New York can just prove once again that they're dominant in this matchup. As for Florida, they've won a very easy game against the Outlaws, and they've lost one they were expected to lose to, and that was, of course, to the Philadelphia Fusion. And something from New York I'd like to see is maybe a little bit more DPS flexibility. Like maybe let's see Libero on May as opposed to Who Are You, because Who Are You was definitely struggling against Philly. Maybe a little bit too early to pull the trigger on Who Are You. I think he's definitely still a talented player, but maybe just see how Libero does on that May role. And for Florida, I think they're pretty much expected to lose this one, but if they keep it close, it would definitely be a good step forward, as they're definitely improving than the Florida that they were in Season 1 and Season 2. Anyway, my prediction for this matchup is going to be the New York Excelsior taking this one 3-1. I think Florida could sneak a map in there. Anyway, I will invite you guys to go ahead and vote in the Google form in the description below, and go ahead and pick who you think is going to win the Excelsior versus the Mayhem. Alright, next up we have the Toronto Defiant versus the Atlanta Reign, and believe it or not, this is the first time we are seeing the Atlanta Reign this season. It feels a little weird because obviously the Asian teams haven't played yet because of the coronavirus outbreak, but the reason the Reign haven't played is just due to scheduling. This is their first scheduled match of the week, and it was a month into the season. Anyway though, they are debuting against the Toronto Defiant, and I'm excited to see this matchup. Toronto is coming off a pretty impressive loss to Philadelphia, all things considered. The fact they took them to a map 5 was pretty impressive, and Atlanta is very hyped going into this season, so I'm excited to see how this matchup plays out. Anyway, for my prediction, I have Atlanta winning this 3-1. I think their additions are just a little bit stronger than Toronto's lineup currently, and the weaknesses Toronto has shown I don't think are enough to beat how hyped this Atlanta Reign team is. But I will push this over to you guys. Who do you think is going to win Atlanta versus Toronto, go ahead and vote in the Google form. And our last matchup for the hometown team on Saturday is going to be the London Spitfire versus the Houston Outlaws. And London is coming off of a very impressive reverse sweep over Washington. Glister and Sanguinar look great after this, and they have a lot of great momentum after a pretty poor performance at their first homestand. Whereas Houston, this is their first homestand, and they're subbing Linkser in on the hit scan role, so we're assuming Blase McCree won't be in this match. And I think this is a good change, but I don't think it's enough. I think they still have fundamental issues with the lineup, and they need to work on figuring that out. Anyway, my prediction for this matchup is going to be London taking it 3-1, and that's mostly just because I've liked a lot more of what I've seen from London so far than what I've seen from Houston. But I will go ahead and give the vote to you guys. Do you think the homestand advantage is enough, or do you think that London still probably has this? Now let's go ahead and go into the Sunday matches in Houston, and we're going to start with Boston versus Philly. And Boston is coming off of a very weird game against Houston, where, of course, it went to map 7, they drew 2 maps, but they did end up winning it 3-2. And I thought their rookies showed promise, as I mentioned. Jerry, Muffin, and Swimmer all showed potentials. However, this is a much harder challenge with the Philadelphia Fusion, who are probably the best team right now. Yes, maybe I'm saying that a little bit too early because the Shock are dominant as well, but we've seen a lot more of the Fusion than we've seen of the Shock so far. And I think Boston, try to make this as competitive as you can, but they're still not really a great team, so I have Philly taking this one 3-1. I think Boston could maybe sneak a map in there because Philly is known to let a few games slip here and there. So I'm going to give this one to Philadelphia 3-1. Anyway, I'll invite you guys to vote. Go ahead and give your prediction. Next up is going to be Paris versus Atlanta. And this one's a little hard to gauge because, as I mentioned with the previous Atlanta matchup, we don't know how good Atlanta is going to be next year, but Paris has been overperforming. I think if you were to ask people how they thought Paris would be through the first couple of weeks of the season, I think the answers would be pretty underwhelming, and the fact that they're looking this good without Sparkle joining the lineup, and with kind of a flimsy tank line and a mixed roster, they've looked great so far, I think, for what they're dealing with. If their only loss is a close one against Toronto, that's pretty good to start the season. However, Atlanta is a lot more of a challenge, and I think Paris' tank line needs to really show up for them to win. Anyway, for my prediction for this matchup, I have Atlanta taking it 3-1 with Paris sneaking one map, but I will go ahead and invite you guys all to vote. Who do you think will win this matchup, the Paris Eternal or the Atlanta Reign? Next up is going to be the London Spitfire versus the Florida Mayhem, and I think this is one of the closer matchups. These are two teams that definitely had lower expectations this season, but I think are overperforming a little bit. I think Florida hasn't really gotten a chance to show off what their new roster is, and London is just starting to show its potential. And I think this matchup could go either way, but right now I'm leaning at going 3-2 to Florida, but that could easily go to London as well. But I will invite you guys to go ahead and vote on this one. Who do you think has this, the London Spitfire or the Florida Mayhem? And finally, our last matchup of the week is going to be the Toronto Defiant versus the Houston Outlaws. And I think this should be a pretty easy win for Toronto. Houston does have the home field advantage, and they're going to start working with Linkser after he is coming off his illness. And I think this is a step in the right direction, as I mentioned, for their other matchup, but I don't think it's really enough for Houston to really take this. I think the issues for Toronto's lineups are a lot less noticeable than Houston's issues right now, so I just have to give this one to Toronto 3-1. I think Houston could maybe sneak a map just because Toronto has been struggling in some areas, and other than that though, I don't really see Houston having a shot here, so I'm going Toronto 3-1. Anyway, I invite you guys all to vote. Do you guys think I'm crazy here? I'm gonna guess you don't, but go ahead and vote nonetheless. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this weekend. I think there are a lot of great close matchups that we could see, and I'm excited to see how all these teams play out, as well as seeing the debut of the Atlanta Reign in Houston. I do have also some exciting channel news, and that is I'm officially working on a Discord server for all the viewers of the channel to go ahead and interact with. I'm still figuring out some of the permissions that I'm giving the mods versus the administrators versus you guys, and working that all out, so bear with me as I do that, but I'm excited to get this up and running hopefully next week. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate if you liked and subscribed. Go ahead and hit the bell icon. We do these videos weekly, as well as I want to start throwing some more editorial content and some live streams in there too. And I hope you guys all enjoy. Be sure to hit the like button, and I will talk to you guys later. Have a nice day.